thank you very much. So first of all, welcome. Thank you very much for agreeing to be a mentor on this programme with the university. We very much appreciate you taking the time to do so. I am going to do a few quick introductions. So my name is Peter Hooley. I'm the Director of Business Development at the Faculty of Business and Law, and I'm one of 7 people who's responsible for creating this programme. With me today, I'll ask her to introduce herself, is Liz. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Flint. I run a consultancy called Flint Innovation. I'm a fairly experienced mentor and coach, and I'm doing a lot of mentoring on the Help to Grow programme at the moment, which obviously has some parallels with this programme. So Pete's asked me to come and share a few thoughts with you today.
Thank you very much, Liz. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to actually very quickly at the beginning run you through what the actual programme looks like from a participant perspective. So I'm going to give you a holistic view of the entire enterprise programme so that you've got a good understanding of what the participant who you will be mentoring is going through. Then I'm going to hand over to Liz, and Liz is actually going to do some training and some example-based stuff around what good mentoring looks like, what good conversations look like. And at the end of both sections, we'll have a brief opportunity for questions and answers and for people to ask us anything they want to, or go a bit deeper into any of the concepts that we've covered. So I will quickly ask the question before we start. Has anyone got any questions or answers? Or questions, sorry. If you want to answer them as well, you can do. If you want to, I'll ask Alec if he can keep an eye on the chat. If, as thoughts occur, you want to chuck it in the chat, then I'll come to Alec and ask him at various points if anyone's put any questions in the chat, and we'll answer them that way. So that's a nice and easy way for you to interact and make sure that we don't miss out on anything that you want to get answered. So, okay, I will kick off. So a lot of these slides are taken from the induction with yesterday with the actual participants, but I will briefly run you through what the programme is about. So it's an enterprise programme, and it's a programme that's designed to help people become more enterprising. It's not a programme per se that is there to help people start a business or to get into commercial industry. It's about enterprising behaviours. So we anticipate that people will be looking to do things like start a commercial business, or even a social enterprise, or a charitable project, or possibly do something inside their community, want to be more enterprising to be better and more employable, or to perhaps on a student basis go for a graduate scheme, or perhaps just want to polish up that area of being enterprising, or move from being perhaps what they consider to be not enterprising to being enterprising. And certainly the conversations that we had with participants yesterday indicate a really broad range of people who want to start their own businesses based on a creative talent that they have, including some students who just say, I recognise that I'm not very enterprising, I come from a family that aren't very enterprising, and I want to change that, and that's why I'm on the course. So the spectrum of people on the course is quite wide, but as I'll come on to later, they're being asked to reflect and use something called an enterprise growth action plan to recognise that, and to actually develop some aims around what they want to get out of the course and how that might happen. And that's, I'm going to talk you through it shortly, but that is one of the tools that we're going to ask them to use when talking to their mentors, so there's something structured to base the conversation around. I say it's education, but not as we know it. We are obviously doing an education piece, but we're not doing it in the traditional sense. So in the traditional sense of, we lecture some knowledge, we perhaps do some interaction or focus group work, and then we finish the lecture, we're sort of doing it the other way around. We're using practitioners to come in and tell their story around key concepts, which I'll cover shortly. And we have based, although not entirely, the course on something called the Entrepreneurial Competency model, which is a European research model, which you can Google. There's a nice little flower diagram there, but it's based around these 3 overarching areas of enterprise, which are ideas and opportunities, resources, and going into action, and then various subsets of that. And I'll talk you through it in a moment. We've divided it into 8 effective subsets. And the whole course is based around building confidence in those competencies. So it's about helping the person recognize the competency, think about how confident they are at the moment, go through the session, and at the end think about how competent they are, and if they hopefully improve, or how they might improve that competence in the future, or how it might apply to their enterprising idea, so on and so forth. It's split into 8 modules, and there are 8 sessions. They're able to attend them online and in person. As part of those sessions, we're putting them into peer groups that we hope will at best be lifelong, but at the very least endure for a significant period after that, as a sort of action support or action learning set kind of approach. And they're each going to get a mentor to support them, hence where yourselves are coming in. As the program goes, they're allowed to, it's not credit bearing. So for those of you who aren't in education, it's not towards a degree qualification. We are giving them the option that they can exit when needed. If they do exit, we will let you know, and it will be very much down to them whether they want to continue with the number of hours of mentoring, whether as part of that exit they'll also exit from the mentoring, but we'll keep you informed. The university will acknowledge their achievement regardless of what they've completed within the programme, and it is a course where we welcome them back at any point, or even to do the whole course again if that's what they need. So it is, because it is a course that's very much about personal development. And it is a course where the final module is about being supported, where we intend to support them beyond the course in their entrepreneurial or enterprise entrepreneurial journey. One of the things we do, and it's something perhaps we would encourage them to share with you in their thinking, is that before each session we ask them to assess their competence, or assess their confidence, in the various competencies that go with each module. Now, there's a link to the Enterprise Growth Action Plan on the webpage. And if you look at that action plan, you can see it's laid out in each module. You can see the 4 or 5 competencies that are being addressed in each module. And we basically, on a 0 to 6 scale, where 0 is no confidence whatsoever and 6 is highly confident, we ask them before the modules to assess, and then at the end of the week, following the module, we ask them to do it again. Partly that is to get them thinking about whether it's improved or not, and how that might happen. And again, that's part of the conversations we want to have with mentors, but it's also so that we can, to some degree, start to measure within a reference point of the individual whether or not we're having an impact. I say it's 8 modules. The way that they run: pre-module assessment, they hear from an enterprising person, they have questions and answers on that, they then break into peer groups to discuss. That is typically around a case study example, so they can start to tear it apart as a group about what does and doesn't apply to them, what makes them think, what doesn't, and everything else. Yesterday we didn't do it around a case study example, we did it around them, because it was about storytelling. We did it around them looking at their own story, meeting their peer groups and discussing the points that the enterprising person had brought up. And then we leave them with the 2 tips, tricks, models, and ask them to do the post-module assessment. And I'll show you briefly what we did yesterday shortly. There are 8 modules in total. Number 1 is an induction and learning to tell your story. So learning to tell your enterprise idea or enterprise journey, or what you want to get out of it. Number 2 is about being self-critical and being comfortable with that, and tearing apart your ideas and using other people to do that. Number 3 is about getting going and not waiting for perfect to get in the way of good. 4 is about research, but in research terms, it's not an academic research, but actually about researching their enterprising idea or their enterprising project, activity, behavior. So if it's a commercial idea, it could be about market research, or if it was a community idea, it could be about looking for best practice research, or anything, those kind of areas. Number 5 is about resilience, thick skin, dealing with uncertainty, being comfortable with uncertainty, recognizing risk and recognizing how to ensure that it's only a barrier when it's appropriate. 6 is about utilizing people if you around you. And 7 is about actually going into action and actually putting it to the test. So, for example, if somebody's got an idea, recognizing that they could do a market test without actually having to figure it out and launch a product or launch a service or launch a community group, to see if along their journey they could actually start quite a lot earlier than most people tend to realize. And in that context, yesterday, there's some good conversations about positive mental attitude, negative mental attitude, and in the middle, the no change kind of scenario. And then number 8 is about being supported. And in number 8, I'll cover it in a sec, we're going to ask them to finish off their enterprise growth action plans by having an enterprise aim, and hopefully having a 3-month, 12-month, and 24-month objective, and say what resources and what activities they need to undertake to reach those 3 objectives. That enterprise growth action plan, it'd be great if you can have a look at the blank and just have a scan through. It effectively gives them an opportunity to reflect on what they see in each module, and it encourages them to reflect and ideate around what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and what they might change. We are actively encouraging them, actually, with each mentor conversation, to go through the pieces of their action plan that they have not been through with their mentor up to that point, so they actually form a basis of discussion. And if you have a look at the action plan, you'll see that there's a section there for them to almost reflect on, now having spoken to a mentor, what's changed. And also at all points to be considering what their next steps might be. There is an opportunity at the end for them to submit the final page, which is the page that sort of says, what's my aim, what's my 3, 12 and 24-month objectives, and what resources do I need and what might they cost. And it's a bit of a competition, again, the details are on our website, around them being able to win some up to £3,000 to support that activity. And we've got, at the moment, we've got 3 categories. I think we're going to expand it, but the categories are best commercial idea, most improved enterprising person, and best social enterprising idea. But I think we're actually going to increase the prize pot and increase some of the categories. But they don't have to enter, but that's, if they want to, the culmination of their enterprise growth action plan is to submit that final page. But probably an important point to note is that we don't expect to see any of the rest of their action plan. It's personal to them. And they can use it as a basis for discussion with their mentor, or they can share it with their mentor, but they don't have to. It is their document to own. Alec, who's on the call today, we say this to them, is the point of contact for the program, and he's also the point of contact for mentors. It is a pilot program. We have thought an awful lot of the program through, but we recognise that because it's a pilot, there are elements that we have not thought through because we've just unforeseen. And so we have decided to make Alec a face of the program, a person that can be directly interacted with, rather than having FAQs and vast amounts of web pages and everything else. So if as a mentor you do have questions, we're very happy to answer them on an individual basis, and Alec is the person to push those questions through. Just to give you an idea of what they did yesterday, so they heard from Dave Thompson, who's the chief executive of an organisation called Suaida, and he told them all about his story and about his motivation and about how he tells his story and about how that got him through childhood and how he used positive mental attitude to not allow obstacles to get in the way. And he effectively told them, and then quite a long sort of 10-minute Q&A session where they asked him direct questions about how would he overcome, and they went through all that. They then broke into their peer groups, they did introductions to each other. They told each other, it took 5 minutes each to tell their stories and where they come from, what they were hoping to achieve from the course and get out of it. And then they had a broader group discussion about what resonated with them from David's story. How did it correlate to the competencies? So for example, if you can see here that in the storytelling, the competencies we were looking to get more confidence in is spotting opportunities, being creative, having vision, valuing ideas, as rather than sort of saying, oh, that won't work, and starting to think about how things can be sustainable. And we left them with some tips and tricks on how to do that when they're not in the room or not having somebody right next to them. So that we gave them sort of 7 tips on how to spot opportunities, 7 on how to be more creative, 6 on visioning, 5 on valuing ideas, and then introduce them to the idea of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a nice reference tool to think about what sustainable areas does their idea or does their enterprise behavior kick into. So that, and I say, Alec, okay, I put this up quite a lot. Alec is the person to go to if you have questions. That is a very, very quick run through of what the participants will get from the program. Before, sorry, Liz, I'm moving your slides on by accident. Before I hand you over to Liz, does anyone have any questions? And while people put their hands up or raise, Alec, are there any questions in the chat? No, okay, look. So, any questions on that? I think it's probably quite self-explanatory, but I'm happy to answer any people do have any. Liz, would you like me to be your slide advancer and you could do your Chris Whitty and say next slide, please? I will hand you over to the very talented Liz Flint.
No pressure, thanks, Pete. Before I go into this section, folks, can I just have a quick show of hands? Who has been a mentor before? A few of you? Okay, ish. For 1 or 2. Okay, lovely. So some of you are completely new to this and some of you have done it before. Brilliant. So I think this is a really interesting program. We ran something similar when I used to work at Brunel University, and I was always blown away by the energy of the young people who came on the program and who I worked with as a result. I'm also at the moment a monitoring officer for Innovate UK on a whole bunch of their Young Innovators programs. So they're people aged between 18 and 25. And again, the energy and enthusiasm and the sheer rate of idea generation among those people is amazing. It kind of makes me feel young again and also slightly in awe of these people. But of course, they are early in their careers. There's a whole bunch of stuff they don't know and a whole bunch of stuff they're not confident with yet. So your role is going to be really important. Next slide, please. There we go. Thanks, Pete. So the role you're playing really in this is to help them through it. So they eventually need to be developing their enterprise growth action plan. So, you know, we need to keep bringing it back to that and making sure that they are writing stuff down and that the different parts of the plan are connecting. But you can be there as a critical friend as well the whole way through. It's not just about making sure they've written things down in the plan. It's about helping them develop. So fundamentally, you're here to offer them guidance. You're not here to tell them what to do and how to do it. You're here to help them find within themselves the confidence and the ideas and the planning for what they're going to do next. So helping them to see the enterprise potential they've got, look at what barriers they've got, and encouraging them. But obviously you will be doing things like introducing them as well. You know, if there's people you know who would be useful for them to talk to, then make an introduction. You know, help them see their potential and aspire, help them be ready to have conversations that they may be a little bit nervous about beforehand, and obviously be a positive role model. Now, Pete mentioned earlier on that some of these people on the scheme are wanting to start a business, some aren't, some are aware that enterprising behaviour is a gap in their own skill set. So there will be a wide variety of starting points. And one thing I like to talk to people about when I'm working in this area is intrapreneurship as well as entrepreneurship. The point of that being that the skills and behaviours of being an enterprising person are just as valuable and just applicable when you're working for someone else as when you set up your own business to work for yourself. So if your young person, your delegate on the programme, when you start getting to know them, isn't interested in setting up their own business, then it's equally valuable for you to be helping them to develop their enterprise potential, because it will make them that employee that everybody wants to hire. Okay, next one, please, Pete. So in terms of what we need you to do, they've just had module 1, as Pete summarised earlier. So once they're on module 2, they'll be starting to have regular meetings with you. So we'd like you to make sure you've got an hour a week available to meet with them. It's fine to do mentoring on Zoom if that works for both of you. Face-to-face, if you both want to, is equally good. And it's quite nice to have a face-to-face one early on if it's possible, but don't worry too much if not. So Alec will make the introductions for you. Generally, as a mentor, I then take the initiative for the next step to immediately get in touch with them and say, hi, I'm your mentor, let's get a first meeting in the diary. I find with these sorts of programs that if things don't get off to a quick and enthusiastic start, it's quite hard to bring them back in again later. So sort of push the momentum at the beginning, I think is what I'm saying. So you'll have coaching conversations, and I'll talk a bit more in a minute about some sort of tips on doing that, and use that enterprise growth action plan, which we'll show you a snapshot of in a minute, to help them to reflect, to help them to think and plan and move from ideas into action. And of course, we'd love you to encourage them to enter the competition as well. You know, you would hope that the attraction of £3,000 will be enough, but again, there's a confidence thing here. You know, some of them may well feel, oh, well, there's all these amazing people who've got these brilliant business ideas. I've got no chance up against them. So make sure that they're thinking about their own unique capabilities and potential and what great use they could make of that money and the case they could make, not just comparing themselves with other people on the programme. Okay, next one, please. So the team at Portsmouth will make sure you've got access to all of the programme material. I'm assuming Alec is going to be providing all of this because he's the point man, as Pete keeps saying. You'll have access to this training as well, obviously, and you'll have a breakdown of what they're covering in the modules and topics that you could talk about with them. And there apparently will be an FAQ in good time. So there we go. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so let's get to the core of this. What is mentoring? So some of you already know this because you've done it. For some of you, it's new. So as it says on the slides, it's about an ongoing relationship, and it's about a relationship that does need to be led by them, despite what I said earlier about getting some momentum going at the beginning. So it needs to be them that guide what gets covered in the sessions, for example. And generally speaking, as with all of you here, you have more experience in your professional lives and in business than your mentees will do. And you can share that knowledge and experience as well as boosting their confidence and helping them develop. So the way I generally try to do this is around, how to put this, it's around getting under the skin of that person as quickly as you can and figuring out what style of intervention they need. There's a whole range of styles you can use as a mentor. Everything from just pure sort of supportive, confidence boosting, very gentle, very kind type of approach, right up to the other end of the spectrum where you're being really directive and telling them what to do. Now, most of the time for most mentees and most mentoring conversations, where you need to be is somewhere in the middle, but you'll find that that shifts by conversation. So some conversations that you're having, you need to be using coaching style questions, you know, things like, what do you notice about that? Reflecting back to them what they've just said, summarizing, and asking them to notice, for example, where they've shown evidence of underselling themselves. That's a good one. If they've been very diffident in the way they've described something, you can play that back to them, say, what do you notice about the sort of language you've just used about yourself? That sort of thing. But there's a whole scale there. Sometimes you'll be in that mode. Sometimes they will just be stuck on something because they just don't know. And if it's something that's within your experience, it's perfectly okay and really valuable to say, well, actually, I faced this situation a few years ago and here's what I did. Or to just ask some probing questions. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? Just, it's fine to lead them a little bit where you've got experience that they just simply lack. So generally speaking, when it's the first session, I try and get that in the diary as quick as I can. And the first session is really about getting to know each other and getting that relationship off to a good start. So the fact they've just done storytelling in module 1 is perfect, because you can ask them to tell you their story and you can tell them yours. It's about starting to build that trust from the beginning, that this is a safe and open relationship where they can be honest about everything with you, but it is a professional relationship. You're not their counsellor. If things start to stray into counselling territory, then you need to reinforce some boundaries there and also flag it to the team, because if actually what they need is counselling, then the university has services that can help there, and it's not your job to become an unofficial and unlicensed counsellor. So just keep an eye on the boundaries a little bit. So in that first session, when I'm building the relationship, one of the other things I try and do often is to establish what degree of challenge works for them. And I generally just ask this as a fairly direct question. And the reason I do is that when you're mentoring, it's really helpful for the mentee to be challenged on what they've said and encouraged to think more deeply or more broadly, depending on what's required. What's really unhelpful is to push them into feeling defensive. And that point is different for everybody. So I generally just have that discussion with them. You know, I don't want to push things and make you feel defensive. So let's have an open conversation about your type of personality and how much is too much. Quite often people will say, yeah, bring on the challenge, I love it. They don't always mean that. It's what they think they should say. So I tend at that point to share that actually my personality type and behaviours, I do tend to get defensive if I feel my ideas have been criticised. So it's okay to not want to be challenged really hard, and for you to tell me as your mentor what the best way to challenge you and help you grow is without pushing you into defensiveness. So that's quite an important conversation in the first meeting. The other thing I think is well worth doing, particularly with this group of enterprising young people, is to set the parameters that this is a professional relationship, that you have a limited period of time together, although obviously, you know, there's the potential for an ongoing relationship, but mentoring is supposed to be bounded to a certain extent, and that they need to be in the driving seat in terms of coming to sessions, having thought about what they want to get out of that session, what they want to discuss, and what a really good endpoint for the discussion would be. So you can sort of scaffold the conversation. So encourage them to come to the meeting having thought about what topic they want to cover. It may well be the module they've just done, or it might be something else. To have thought about, okay, what would be a really good outcome from this meeting? Is it that with the help of my mentor, I've now written out my plan for the next month? Is it that with the help of my mentor, I now have drafted, I don't know, my opening email to somebody who I want to speak to, who I've never met before, whatever it might be. So set that success criteria at the beginning of the meeting and then check in at the end of the meeting and see if you and the mentee have got that. So that's generally how I approach the first meeting, setting some parameters and boundaries and finding out about them. Then in a typical mentoring session, I would normally start with a bit of chit chat. You know, it's important to keep building that relationship. This isn't a sort of clinical, fact-based relationship. It's about people. I'll check in with them. So since we last spoke, what's been going on? Where have you got to? What's been good? What's been bad? What's bothering you? And then talk about, okay, what we're going to cover today and what is the end point you want us to get to with it. Now, I'll introduce you in a minute to a tool called Grow, which helps you to structure those conversations. But before I go on to that on another slide, let me just say that I think in terms of the skills that you use for this, the trick is to really dial up your curiosity, dial up your empathy and your relationship building, but be really curious about them, their thinking, and really want to help them take that further. You know, some of us, myself included, I'm an engineer by background. I tend to be very solution focused. So the thing I have to watch in myself is when someone flags an issue and I think I know the answer, I'll jump straight in and offer the solution. So I have to dial that down when I'm mentoring and dial up the curiosity and the probing, just push them a little bit further and see if they can reach a solution themselves before I start dropping in ideas and suggestions, because that's much more empowering for them than, you know, Liz up here on a pedestal giving them all the answers. So it's about knowing when to listen and when to suggest, when to probe, when to reflect back, and when to just say, actually, have a look at this because I think this solves the problem. Okay, next one, please, Pete. So there we go. In summary, that lovely quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, we're looking to add energy, inspire hope, and blow the coals into a useful flame. I think that's lovely. Okay, next one, please. So in practical terms, there we go. What do you aspire to achieve by the end of the session is a great question. What's the biggest challenge you're facing? That can often help unlock a really good conversation. I often phrase that as what's keeping you awake at night, what's worrying you. Prioritization is likely to be an issue for these guys. They're going to want to do everything all at once and they haven't got time, and they'll end up starting lots of things and not finishing anything. So prioritization, if you could only do one thing, which would it be? Which of those things is the most important of all the things you want to do? Which will make the biggest difference? And that's important. Which will make the biggest difference, not which will you enjoy doing most. Quite often people will naturally gravitate to the task that they enjoy and comes naturally to them, but that might not be the thing they need to move them on. Okay, next one, please. So here's the Grow model. So it's a typical academic business school model, I have to say, in that they sort of forced the acronym a bit. But the letters stand for goals, reality, options, and either what's next or will, which really means commitment. So the idea is that you follow this cycle through the mentoring session. Once the mentee has identified what topic they want to work on and where they want to be at the end of the session, you use a structured set of questions to pull it all the way through to some planning and some commitment to action. So the goal bit, you may need to do that to really get them settled on what they want to cover in the session. Reality is all about understanding where they are right now, what their experience of the situation is, what other people are experiencing, what the boundaries are around their ability to act. Options obviously speaks for itself, looking at the possible things they could do, looking up the pros and cons, degrees of risk, that sort of thing, and then finally moving on to action. So the next 4 slides give some example questions. I'm not going to talk through all of those. They're in the slide deck, just so they're a resource for those of you who haven't mentored before, because I know from my own experience that going into your first mentoring relationship and the first conversations, you can feel a bit uncertain. And I personally found having a bunch of questions in my back pocket in case I didn't feel the session was flowing was really helpful. So there's a load of examples there for goal. On the next one, please, Pete, there's some examples around what the current reality is, helping them to use a scale of 1 to 10, for example, to look at, you know, how far away from where you want to be are you at the moment? What impact is it having? These are more focused on the coaching of an individual side rather than the business side. And I've deliberately used this set because of the range of mentees you're going to have, because not all of them are working towards starting a business. So you can have much more business focused ones. So I've deliberately used this set for that reason. On the next one, please, Pete, there's again some questions about options. They're pretty obvious ones, really, but I like the what has worked in the past question in particular. That could be what's worked for you. What have you seen work elsewhere? Yeah. Who could help? How can you find the information? You know, don't fall into the trap of being their personal Google. You know, encourage them to seek out information for themselves. That module on research is really important. People learning how to use resources to find answers rather than taking the easy route of just asking someone more experienced than them. And on to W, please, Pete, for Will. So what are you going to do? The really important thing here is to encourage them by the end of the session to have committed to what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and how they're going to hold themselves accountable. So obviously you play a role in holding them accountable because you're going to expect them to come to the next session and tell you what progress they've made. But it's important they hold themselves to account. You know, you're not their mum or dad, you're not their teacher. So they, you know, you're not checking if they've done their homework and telling them off if they haven't. So it's getting them out of that mindset that they might be used to as somebody, you know, fairly early in their career, still a student, that, yeah, you're not your mum, I'm not your mum, I'm not your teacher, I'm here to help you hold yourself to account. Okay, on to the next one, please, Pete. But with all of this, it's really important that we come back to what they're on this programme to achieve. Okay, so for example, there on the storytelling bit, there's some boxes there from the enterprise growth plan, which encourage them to take some notes. And I think it's really useful in the mentoring session to ask them what they noted. That might help seed the conversation, and it helps you as well to make sure that they are making the best use of the programme, that they're not just sitting there and listening and not taking action. Back to that point about being accountable for taking action. Okay, next one, please. So there are some examples there when they've been through a case study, looking at those different competencies that Pete talked about earlier, making some notes on what they've seen in the case study, and then reflecting on what they themselves are going to take forward. And that's obviously the really important bit. Okay, next one, please. There we go. That's it from me. So I think if we stop sharing the slides, and Pete and I can answer any questions that you've got.
I even worked out how to do it. So get a chat up. Does anyone want to raise their hand and ask a specific question, or pop one in the chat? I've certainly got one while people think about that, which is, Liz, you said make sure that it doesn't turn into a counselling session. How do you recognise it's turned into a counselling session? What would your tip be for putting the stops on? I mean, obviously, if someone says, you know, I was a complete nervous breakdown in front of you, that's probably quite obvious.
Yeah.
What's the key indicators it's heading in that direction?
That you're right to ask, because that is tricky. So I have a lot of mentoring conversations which move into behaviours, personalities, interpersonal challenges in the workplace. That's absolutely fine. You can probably see the colour charts behind me. It's an important part of what I do, is the interpersonal stuff. So I think what gives you the clue that it's moving into counselling is if somebody is, I suppose, unable to move past negative thoughts about a situation and unable to go through that cycle of the GROW model of thinking about options and action. If they're just stuck in a really emotional place, that's, to me tipping into, okay, as a mentor, I can't really help with this. That's much more personal. I mean, an obvious other one is if they're just talking about some personal issues, that, you know, a bit of personal chat is great. It helps build the relationship. But if the only thing that they're talking about is, I don't know, the terrible relationship with their stepfather or something, then that's not really the job of the mentor to help with that, I don't think. But yeah, it's a tricky one. If you start to feel uncomfortable, then flag it to the team, I think, is the advice I'd give.
There's another one from me. I mean, just to comment for people that there are alums, staff, and students on the program. There will be some people who perhaps we might not categorize as young people, but I won't go there. Do that. But what about really shy people, where actually the conversation is like pulling teeth? Now, obviously, if people have a lot of that going on, then come back to us and we can try and see if we can listen about it, make sure the mentor relationship is right. But in your experience, when you have one of those who perhaps on the first session that is really withdrawn, how do you coax them out?
So the first thing I do is dial down my own bubbliness, because if somebody's very introverted and quiet, I'm their worst nightmare in my natural state as I'm talking to you today. So I dial that right down. I'll become much quieter, much calmer, much steadier, and try to help them feel they're in a calm and comfortable place where they can open up. I will ask them some very gentle questions, try to ask some really easy ones to get things going. You know, it could be something as stupid as, you know, have you got any pets or whatever. Just try to get something gentle going, and then try to understand what's behind the reticence. What are they nervous about, and how can I help them overcome it? It is difficult. It is difficult. I made the mistake on the Help to Grow program once. I also facilitate that. So I run peer group sessions. I accidentally put all of the introverts into one peer group. That was a nightmare. I'd be there for an hour every week. Right. Who would like to bring an issue to the group? And everyone would sort of sit there thinking, please don't pick on me. Please somebody else speak. So yeah, I think you have to be really conscious of your own behaviours and your own natural style, and move as far as you can in their direction to try and make them comfortable and bring them out. You know, there does come a point if they literally won't speak, there's not a lot you can do.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I've just done a classic job of spelling individually there, trying to type and do things at the same time. Has anyone else got any questions for Liz? Andy Clegg says, visualising the endpoint, what does success look like for them, both from a project perspective and also visually? What do they need to get there? So just making some suggestions. Thank you for that, Andy. Does anyone want to raise a hand and ask Liz any questions? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, apologies for not being able to attend on time. I had to attend another meeting. I missed quite a bit, I realized from the beginning. Just a summary-wise, could you tell us what is the role of these individuals when they finish what is the aim of these individuals when they finish the program? And what is the role of mentor in terms of helping throughout this process?
Yeah, I can do that. So we have recorded this, so we'll be able to rewatch it. At the beginning, I did go through the experience the participants will have and explain that to everyone. However, to answer your question directly, so as part of their enterprise growth action plan, by the end, we want them to have an enterprise aim. Why do they want to be more enterprising, and what will that look like in the future? And have a 3, 12, and 24-month objective about how they reach that aim.
Okay.
They've been asked in the enterprise growth plan right at the beginning to think about why they're on the program. When they register for the program, they're also asked the question, you know, why are you here? What are you expecting to get out of it? What's your motivation? And when we email your mentor details, we will share that piece of information with you, so you've got a bit of a starting point. So we've got people on the program for fairly obvious enterprising reasons, which is that they've got something in their back pocket they do, which they wish they could turn into a commercial advantage, start their own business, etc. We've also got people on the program who have recognized that they just come from very unenterprising environments. So one chap on the program yesterday was saying, my family are the very opposite of enterprising, and I want to change that. And we've got people on the program who are just thinking, I want to be enterprising my job or my next job. I want to use this to jump. to push myself a little bit further. So there is a real spectrum. The program is about 65% students with a genuine mix of undergrad, postgrad. So it's not undergrad heavy. But then there's also about 10% alums, and there's about between 10 and 15% staff. I'm trying to work out in my head if I've added that up. I'm only missing 10% somewhere. And we've got a couple of people who are actually from the Queen Alexandra Hospital, Portsmouth, so the hospital as staff, looking to, I think they have typically said that they're looking at sort of technology development ideas. So they're looking to develop their enterprising behaviours. So yeah, the answer is we've asked them to start thinking about it. By the end of the programme, we want them to have a clear aim and some clear objectives about how they get there. And actually they come across a broad range of ages and background.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just checking the chat.
Some interesting bits
will
there
you match that?
Psychometrics, actually. I think that's well raised, Becky, because I think it's getting that self-awareness and that insight into self is one of the most valuable things somebody can do. So yeah, if it's not part of the program, it's not part of the program. But
I think we've got a free resource at the university that I used to use on the apprentices, personality profiling. I just wonder if that's still up and running. But I could find out by just going on it.
Send it over if it is, Becky.
Sorry?
Send it over if it is.
Yeah, no, it'd be a really useful resource. Basically, they get sort of like a whole report on themselves. And I was just thinking, as Liz mentioned there, it's a really good sort of conversation starter, that sort of self-awareness. And if they aren't coming across as particularly self-aware, that can also be a useful instrument and sort of say, well, a good point of discussion. But yeah, I'll have a little look for it and send it to Alex.
I'll come to the chat in a minute, but Caroline and then Linda. Caroline Elder.
I had just put it in the chat, but I realised I've spelled mentee wrong. I was just wondering, I think it said somewhere there's 140 people signed up.
We actually had registrations from about 180. But the reason why we've learned from the Help to Grow programme to our cost, that obviously you get dropout between registration and starting, and then you usually get significant dropout again between module 1 and module 2. I'm guessing as people realise they can't commit. So the reason why we said that mentoring will start after module 2 is that we suspect that number we already know that it's gone from 180 down to about 100. And we expect that number will drop again, probably into the, I expect, 60, 70 mark by the end of module 2, at which point our intention is for the vast majority of people to mentor individually, so a one-on-one relationship. We do have some mentors who have said they're willing to mentor 2 people, but it still will be individually rather than together, because the idea is for this to be quite, to be one-to-one, but to be quite personal. Somebody I'll ask Linda, actually. Linda, go to you first, and then I'll answer some of the questions in the chat.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, it was really just in response to Becky's question about the personality profiling as well. We used to have something in careers, Becky, I think, didn't we? But I'm not sure if we've still got the license. I'll do some digging straight afterwards.
Oh, brilliant. It was just really useful, and the apprentices and students really loved it. It was really good. So yeah, if it's a free resource, it's, as I say, it looks great as well.
Yeah, I'll find out.
Well, and it really.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with another Help to Grow mentor yesterday evening, and one of the things he does is he's got a particular profile he's accredited for, and so he can do one free for each company or something, and he does that as part of what he uses to start the relationship, to dial into the person in front of him, because it does really help you to adjust your own style when you've got that bit of information in front of you.
Joke. I'm sure that's a legacy hand, Linda. If it isn't, leave it up and I'll come back to you. To answer a couple of questions in the chat, Andy, have they been introduced to the concept of entrepreneurship? No, but actually we will. I will weave that into the appropriate module, or we might just actually discuss it at the start of the next module, because I think it's a really good point. We have got some people who have said that they want to become more enterprising, to do their job better, or to work better within their organisation. So I think recognising it would be a really positive thing to do. So thank you for that. Another question that's come from another couple of people is, how are we matching the mentors to the mentees? The honest answer is that we've not gone with a systemised version for 2 reasons. One, we really wanted to see, because it is a pilot, who would come on the programme and who would volunteer to be mentors. And I think what we will be doing is matching them manually by looking at things like your LinkedIn profiles and sort of staff profiles, if you've got them, versus what the people are looking for on the program. If we discover that actually we haven't got any information on you, we probably will come to you individually and ask you for a bit of bio or whatever else. But I think the majority of people can actually access that information publicly. And the other reason not for doing it is that we're looking for them to develop their enterprising skills in quite a pure sense. So we're not particularly looking to say, well, this person's from a technology industry, let's get a technology person. We're actually thinking that let's look at this holistically and see how that goes. And it was a conversation that was held within the delivery team as to whether we do that or whether we don't, and we decided not to. However, there are a few examples whereby, for example, in the hospital, we might look for a public sector enterpriser, or we might look for a health-based enterpriser, because it is such a different cultural environment. But we've not had those conversations and not gone to that level of detail yet. And part of the reason for that is that it is a pilot program. 80-25% of it is properly built, 15% of it we are evaluating as we go, if that's a polite way of putting it. How are we going to have, how are we going to have, well, I have to make my chat window bigger, it keeps scrolling so I can't read it. I'm going to have access to all the relevant materials. We will publish them all publicly on the website, and then we will email you as and when they are up there. So, for example, I've made quite a few notes for a good structured conversation document from what Liz has said today, which I think we'll type up and then send out to you as almost like an aid memoir. But also, as we go, we're going to put an FAQ up. But our intention is actually that it'd be quite public, so that the mentees and the mentors can see the training, the kind of conversations, because there doesn't seem to be any reason why it shouldn't be. Will the mentees take to the stage of compiling a business canvas or business plan? No, Marco, unless they particularly want to, because actually we've not predicated the program on it being a business startup course. There are courses within the uni run by Linda and her team that do exactly that. Group Startup is one of them. And because this is about the developing more enterprising skills, and that's our aim for this pilot, we're not going down that road. However, if we discover actually that is more appropriate to the pilot, we might change it. Happy to provide a bio so that my match can be made. My LinkedIn doesn't cover my story. Please do, Caroline. And Daniel Cho, thanks for today, very helpful. I'll have to leave now. Okay, I can answer that one. You may leave, Daniel. And I think our final one, will there be a collective competency expert skill list of the mentors so we're able to refer signposts where appropriate? We hadn't thought about it, David, but I'll make a note of it, because it's probably not a bad idea in terms of enabling you all to share and support each other as a team if you wish to. So I'll make a mention there, and we'll see what we can pull together. Collective list. Are there any more questions or queries? If not, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Liz. I really appreciate her taking the time, because I know she is very busy with lots of other things and stuff that we give her in other areas, for coming and talking to us about being a mentor. It has been recorded, so Alec will share it later so you can look at it again. But otherwise, I would just say, if there aren't any more questions, have a really lovely rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and enjoy it. Go have fun.
Thank you.